Thank you so much for joining us here on CNN. What do you make of the reports, and what more have you been able to learn about this individual?
Well, there are a number of things. I was just listening to the previous reports that you were conducting. First of all, it's clear that he wasn't radicalised in between 2010 and 2012. He was stopped from joining al-Shabaab, which is a terrorist organisation, before that. And the British intelligence agencies and the Tanzanian intelligence agencies believe that there was enough evidence to do that. So I think if we start looking at the 2010 and 2012 period alone, that's actually a false flag. So clearly he was radicalised before. And the other thing is, it's very, very upsetting that an organisation like Cage would spin this in the way that they've done. What they've actually done in their version of the events is that they've blamed the British intelligence agencies, they've blamed the Kuwaiti intelligence agencies, they've blamed the Tanzanian intelligence agencies, when in fact, as I mentioned, he was going to join al-Shabaab before that. The truth of the matter is that it wasn't the fault of the Kuwaitis, it wasn't the fault of the British intelligence, it wasn't the fault of the Tanzanians. This was somebody who was radicalised to an Islamist ideology. He believed that he was okay to go and join a terrorist organisation already. He believed that it was God wanted him to go and do it and fight for this organisation, and he's a cold-hearted killer. That's exactly what it is. He's not a victim, he's a terrorist, and he's killing and beheading people if indeed it actually is him.
Before he joined ISIS, become an ISIS militant, he was interested in joining al-Shabaab. He was, as you say, radicalized years ago. We know his background. He comes from a well-to-do family in West London. He was well-educated. So at what point and how did this person become radicalized and then turn into a terrorist?
The profile that you mentioned just there is actually it's quite typical. A lot of people incorrectly think that the profile of somebody who becomes a jihadi is somebody who's below the poverty line, somebody who's not educated. That's actually not true. So the profile is actually one that matches many people that become Islamist terrorists, and the statistics show that here in the UK. But typically, each person's journey is unique. But again, there are certain factors. You know, some perceived personal grievances, either partial grievances or even real grievances, have been converted by charismatic recruiters to actually believe that the whole world is against him because he's a Muslim. The only way that he can actually find answers to his problems is to join the global Islamist caliphate, set up this state. It's almost like a gang, grooming towards a gang, and that God wants him to do this. We also know that for some people there are elements of revenge involved as well, and for some people there are mental health issues. We know that in Norway, for example, a significant number of their convicted Islamist terrorists have suffered from Asperger's syndrome. So it could be a number of things, but these are typical pathways that an individual such as him would have followed.
The Washington Post reports that Mohammed Emwazi appears to leave very little trails on social media. Does that surprise you at all?
No, not at all. For somebody who, in those days especially, was wanting to become a jihadi, who would have had some potential contacts with groups like al-Shabaab, would have known how to overcome basic social media protocols. There are a number of mechanisms that they use to communicate with each other, which didn't involve Facebook or Twitter or any other aspect of social media. Social media really only became a big mechanism sort of 2012-13 onwards. It was used before then, but it really became a vehicle much later on. And we also see that as a result of that, the typical age range of people that go out and join ISIL has reduced as well, and is somewhere in between 14 to 25. And it includes women and young girls as well. So I'm not surprised that he didn't leave that much of a digital footprint, especially if he was, as is alleged, involved with groups like al-Shabaab at that time.
All right, Haras Rafiq, we'll leave it at that. But many thanks indeed for joining us and letting us your very clear insight into the mind of Jihadi John and the many others like him. Thank you.